All right, folks. This is going to be an interesting day. Let's see. All right, so 10:30. I just want to let you know for disclosure's sake, I am going to attempt to live stream this on my YouTube channel at the same time. So we'll have a YouTube audience going on. The camera is not pointed at you, so nobody can be on. It's just all actually just going to come out of my computer. Okay? So just want to let you know that ahead of time. And saying hello to my YouTube audience. So just guys, let me know if you can hear me okay. And it's that would be great. Just give me an indication that you guys can hear me. I'm going to raise the audio levels. And this way they can see what we're doing, and at the same time with what I'm going to be talking about today. So I guess we can safely say now that the winter is over. So after just an amazing winter season, so it seems like always we flip switches and we go from winter weather to summer weather. That's usually how it works. Just so for clarification's sake, because every year one recurring theme is the fact that apparently every year whatever weather we're experiencing is something that we've never experienced before. I've lived on Long Island for 30 years, and one thing I figured out very, very early on is that the springs here are miserable. It is a miserable time of year, the cold ocean and all the rest of it, so there's nothing new going on this spring that we haven't seen in other springs. It just, spring in the Northeast is just god-awful. So I just want to at least put that up front and center. Now, we just started yesterday, our first our new hurricane season just got underway. And the season normally goes from June to November, but this year it got an early start, as we've actually had, for the third time in the last 7 years, we've had a tropical storm in the month of May. And this was Alberto, moved into Florida Panhandle last week. So it got things going. It's not necessarily an indicator of what the season is going to be like going forward. It just happened when it happened, and what the weather conditions are that spurred it at that time to develop in May. May or may not necessarily be there 2 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, or 3 months from now when we go into the heart of the hurricane season. I just want to at least leave you, right off the bat with respect to some tools that you should have handy with regards to tropical storms, hurricanes, and trying to get information. Your go-to website should be NHC, National Hurricane Center, nhc.noaa.gov. Okay, and I brought up their website here. You can see if you want to look at the Atlantic side. This is the page that comes up when you bring it up, and they give you a 2- and 5-day forecast outlook, and it's updated 4 times a day. So right now, no new tropical cyclones are expected in the next 5 days in the Atlantic. And if you click on the other side, there is one weather system in the Pacific that they're watching that they actually rate a 60% chance of becoming a tropical depression in, over the next 5 days. So this is a good starting point in terms of getting information. The other place you should be going to is you go to weather.gov, which I will bring up now. And there we go. So from here, you can access your local National Weather Service office. You weather geeks in the room already know this. So, but you can access your local National Weather Service office. I'm clicking on ours right near Long Island. So this is the New York office that covers Long Island. And one of the things, I don't think they have updated this yet, but they are going to have their own tropical page and it's going to be consistent with all the other offices, so that if if you have loved ones in other parts of the country, up and down the East Coast, and you want to check on what's going on there, you'll get the same. You'll be able to get the same access to information, whichever way you go. It's all going to be. There's going to be a level of consistency with regards to the products that are going to be offered. You won't find them on one and not necessarily find them on the other. So I just wanted to kind of start that off, and I'm going to do a couple of things. We're going to review last year a little bit, and then look ahead to what's going on for this year. And also, by the way, I'm Joe Cioffi. Okay, I don't know if I introduced myself at the beginning. I'm a little bit kind of off today because if you can hear from my voice, I have a bit of a head cold. It's actually quite a bit of a head cold. So I'm going to, I'm kind of a little bit slow on the uptake. So bear with me, and I appreciate your patience. Thank you. But I've been on. I'm right now working at FiOS 1 News, Long Island and New Jersey, with my colleague Joe Rayo, who works FiOS 1 News Hudson Valley. Those of you who are on my Facebook page will know, because we have a nightly show that Joe and I do called the Joe and Joe Weather Show, and it's on. You can see it either on my Facebook page or his Facebook page. I also have a YouTube channel, which you can also. If you really want to sit and listen to an hour weather video every day, that's a good place to go. You can come to my YouTube channel. So let's start by reviewing last year, which was really a remarkable season. And by the way, it goes to one of the things that I think is really important, because like anything with weather, there's this wanting to know now about what's going to happen then. And there could be many, many weeks between now and then. And it's very hard, if not almost impossible, to really give you anything more than just sort of a general view of what kind of season it's going to be like. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't help you very much, because all forecasters can really tell you is it going to be an above average season or a below average season. They can't tell you where those storms are going to be. You could have, as we saw actually a number of times over the last 15 years, we've had a number of above average seasons, but we went through a very long stretch where the United States did not see a hurricane make landfall. And the Gulf of Mexico went through a stretch of many years without seeing a hurricane making landfall. So you can have, above normal storms, but if they all stay out to sea, it's a good thing, okay? On the other hand, you could have a subnormal year like 1992, where all it takes is one, and in that year was Hurricane Andrew that wiped out much of South Florida, from south of Miami, Homestead, and all of South Florida. That was in a year of subnormal activity. There were only, usually in a given hurricane season, we have about 12 to 14 named storms, and maybe 6 or 7 of them become hurricanes. In that particular year, there were half as many. So it just happened that one of them hit land, and that's really the bottom line. We could have the 1938 hurricane hit Long Island in a year that was below average in terms of overall activity. Sandy came in a year that was above average, way above average. So you get all kinds of mixed messages when it comes to saying, what kind of hurricane season are we going to have? Is it going to be below average or above average? It's not really a very important factor. I think we just kind of have to deal with these things one storm at a time, see what they form, where they're going to go, and if they're going to have any kind of impact on us. Anybody recognize this hurricane from last year? Harvey. Harvey. Yes, this is Hurricane Harvey. Like the honey goose. Harvey. Okay, that's Hurricane Harvey. And Harvey became the first Category 4 hurricane to hit land in the U.S. in quite a long time. We were kind of like in a bit of a drought. But this one, especially for the Gulf of Mexico, Harvey really wrapped up. And if you look on the satellite loop, how well defined that eye became right before it hit landfall. Also, excuse me, it's going to roll back to the beginning in a second. But watch what happens when it goes inland. It kind of just meanders, and this is the reason why they had in some places 5 feet of rain in southeast Texas, was because it took 4 days for that storm, once it moved inland, to get out of the way. If you look at the dates, it goes inland around August 25th, and it's still sitting there in East Texas on August 29th, and then moves offshore again and starts to strengthen before it finally moves inland. The conspiracy theorists will tell you that they were spraying the upper atmosphere for this. Okay, no, I get that a lot. I wish I didn't have to. I wish I didn't get that, but maybe one day somebody will show me pictures and proof, and when they do that, that's a different story. But no, nobody sprayed. This is what happens. Sometimes when you have situations like this in the upper atmosphere where the flow, the upper winds collapse, storms stop moving. And that's what happened here. You had a scenario which doesn't really happen that often, but it does happen from time to time, where the upper air winds just kind of collapsed. And the outcome was that for southeast Texas, they got clobbered with a 100-year flooding event. So that was the first of the major hurricanes that we had in the Atlantic Basin last year. And here is Hurricane Irma. And there was also Hurricane Jose in that shot. And at the same time, when it comes back to the beginning, you'll see it at one point there were 3 hurricanes at the same time. You had Irma in the middle, Katia in the southwestern Gulf, and there's Jose. Jose and Irma both became Category 5 hurricanes. Irma set a record for being Category 5 hurricane for 5 days. For 60 hours, for 2.5 days. And that's the longest that we've had, the longest timed stretch of a storm maintaining Category 5 status. That is a very extreme level of strength, and it can't hold it forever. So at some point it is going to weaken. But one of the remarkable things that I experienced, at least trying to forecast this, was watching the weirdest things happen. You can follow that eye as it moves across. So if you look along the coast when it hits Cuba, it actually literally bounces off the coastline. The friction between the eye of the hurricane and the topography was so obvious and so important in terms of the overall structure of the storm that the eye actually bounces. It just kind of bounces right along there. I think that there is a. Let's see if I can find a better shot. I think there's a close-up shot of when it. Let's see. Okay. By the way, it's amazing what's on the internet, folks, that you can find. There's so much wonderful stuff. Let's see if this is September 9th to 12th. Okay, let's try this one. All right, this is a view of Irma, as it comes out off the Florida Straits, and you can see that, crosses the Keys and then goes inland near Marco Island, but that's not the one I was looking for. I wanted to see if they had the one for Cuba, which apparently they don't. Let's try this one, unless it's too tight. And Here's the point where the eye is coming. Apparently, they don't have the stretch where it bounces off Cuba. But if you look at the topography of the islands there, how there's this island chain that sits out off the coast of Cuba, off the north coast of Cuba. It just basically bounced. It went over all those islands. It just bounced from one to the other to the other. It was a remarkable thing to see in terms of it's something I never really had seen before. And by the way, this also, there were a couple of odd experiences from my standpoint that were, I guess maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, maybe humbling a little bit. But when all these tropical storms were moving through the islands, one of the things that happened was that after, well, there was a realization to me that I thought was remarkable, and that is that for a lot of those islands, when Hurricane Irma went by, their communications were completely wiped out. And right behind Irma, literally a couple of days behind it, is another Category 5 hurricane, Jose. And I received a communication from someone in St. Thomas, and she told me that, on Facebook, and she said to me that the communication was so limited, she wasn't able to get anything in terms of any kind of, and she just happened to be lucky enough to get a signal, and she happened to find my page, and I was only, for her, I was just totally out, outside worldview, and it got me thinking about the fact that the people that were on the islands in the northern Leeward Islands who've had their communication cut off don't even know that there's another hurricane coming within days. I mean, and they had to completely evacuate the island of Barbuda, which, by the way, was when they did that, for the first time in 500 years, there was no human being on that island. So it's like these really, I don't know, I guess they're kind of mind-blowing moments to me. You just take so much for granted, you don't think about these things, and here we have some people in some parts of the world that, totally cut off from communication, and we're so used to our phones and having everything at complete access. Last year was kind of a reminder that there are ways where we could lose that, and not, you can find yourself in a situation where you're not going to have communication. So just kind of, I guess maybe we just sort of need to put a little perspective into all of this. I'm going to show you Hurricane Maria next, because Maria was just amazing to me. I was referring to her. I was referring to this hurricane as a buzzsaw because of how it cut how it cut Puerto Rico in half when it moved through. But here is where it moves off over the island of Dominica, or just about to move over the island of Dominica, and you could. That is, an incredibly well-defined eye. It was just about a Category 5 hurricane when it made landfall here on the island, and it actually dissected the island once it moved inland. I'm going to see if I can pull. I'm going to pull up the other loop, crossing Dominica. Now watch the eye. It literally comes in on the southeast coast as soon as it's done loading, and it just transverses. It came in here and then cut right over the entire island, the whole line. It was just amazing. So they were inside the eye wall for hours and hours and hours with 150-mile-an-hour plus winds. I don't even know. I haven't really seen too much of what was left after Maria went through. But this was only the beginning, because now, as it moves into the Northeast Caribbean, it's south of the Leeward and the Northern Leewards and the Virgin Islands, and heading for Puerto Rico. And this is where we basically watched a buzzsaw in action. This is really about the only way. It's like a buzzsaw blade, you know, cutting a log. It comes in on the on the east coast of Puerto Rico, basically dissects the island in half, and then comes out eventually on the northeast side. It went in as a Category 4. It was a Category 5 as it approached. It weakened a little bit. But, you know, when you talk about these storms, Category 4, Category 5, anything from a 3 or above is destructive. And, you know, when you start to get into a high 4, low 5, you're talking about, you know, widespread destruction. And we've seen that there's still 9 months out of this, and they're still, you know, they're still trying to piece things back together. So it would be really awful if this winds up being another season like last year. There's no way to know whether that's the case or not, but it would be really awful if those same places got hit again. The odds are against it, but it's not something that you can really rule out. But these were the major hurricanes that we saw from last year. So where are we going with this year? And let's take a look here. I brought up the Atlantic Ocean water temperatures, and actually also the Pacific, but we don't really care too much about the Pacific. One of the things that's happening this year is the fact that we have no La Nina and we have no El Nino, so we kind of have this sort of neutral situation going on. That one at least, I'm sorry, that one at least led to the probability that we'll have an average, at least an average year, maybe a little bit above average. But one of the things that, whoops, what did I do? Oh. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting was Colorado State University has been putting out hurricane forecasts for many years now. General forecasts, above average, below average, how many hurricanes are going to become major hurricanes, that's Category 3 or higher. So they came out with their forecast back at the beginning of May, and they basically went for an above average year. They were talking about maybe 14 storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 majors. So a couple of days ago, they cut it back by 1. So now they went for 13 storms, 6 hurricanes, and 2 majors. And one of the things that they point out is, if you notice that there's this huge area of blue that extends, this is the African coast, that's Spain. So all the waters in the tropical Atlantic from the African coast westward through the subtropics, north of Puerto Rico, to the Bahamas, the southeast coast of Florida, also into the Gulf of Mexico, and into the Northwest Caribbean, water temperatures are actually a little bit below average. So they pointed to this, excuse me, they pointed to this condition as an indicator that we may be going to, as justification for lowering their forecast by 1. You know, one of the things that when it comes to ocean water temperatures, they can change pretty quickly. So what might be below average now, they might end up being above average 2 or 3 months from now. Also, by the way, a very remarkable thing has happened, and there have been a number of stories about this, but I'm sure you're all familiar with the Gulf Stream, that stream of warm water that's off the East Coast that runs from the Florida Keys up the East Coast off North Carolina, and then kind of swings out into the open waters of the Atlantic, and it goes all the way east toward Ireland and England. And the Gulf Stream is often responsible for juicing up storms sometimes in the wintertime, as well as with tropical systems. Well, there have been a number of stories about the fact that the Gulf Stream in the part that's out in the North Atlantic that passes south of Greenland and heads toward Ireland and England has broken down. It has stopped functioning. And this could be one of the reasons that we have all this cold water that seems to be moving southward. You can't really see, I don't have the map that goes north of this, but it extends up the colder than average water temperatures. The shutting down of the Gulf Stream might be responsible for causing that. Well, if it comes back, where did it go?
Back again.
Yeah. But it may be responsible for bringing all this cold water down into the Atlantic, and then the currents bring it down southward and then turn it westward. So we seem to have ocean water temperatures that, at least for now, would be less favorable for tropical cyclone formation if this trend were to continue, especially in the tropical Atlantic. So that's an interesting development. We also have, over us, we also have slightly below average temperatures. These are the actual sea surface temperatures at the moment around Long Island, and they are generally in the low to mid 50s. We usually by this time, by the beginning of June, ocean water temperatures are usually about between middle and upper 50s. So we're kind of sitting in low to mid 50s, so we're a little bit below average. But you can actually see the Gulf Stream here pretty well. That's right, it goes right out here off North Carolina and then goes east-northeast out in the Atlantic. So it's actually beyond this point that it just breaks down. And that is actually, you can have implications for winters in England and in Ireland, because if the Gulf Stream breaks down, then there's no warm air to kind of mitigate Siberian air that comes in, and they can run, they saw some of it this year when they had a blizzard in Ireland for the first time since 1982. If this may lead to more of that sort of thing for areas that are not used to it. And back in the 1800s, in the mini ice age, by the way, they used to get a lot of snow in England and Ireland. But then the mini ice age ended. For us, by the way, just throwing this out of the side note, the breakdown of the Gulf Stream, if it is significant, may mean that we have to start getting used to our winters getting extended a bit, where we noticed how this year, was well into the month of April, the way things were. Well, that's happened a lot the last 3 or 4 springs. That might be a new thing, where our winters will start a little later, but they're going to continue into March and April. So that's just an interesting development with respect to the Gulf Stream. Yes.
Gulf Stream is the name of air, or it is water?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Gulf Stream is
the Gulf Stream is water.
Water.
Water, yes.
Not air.
Not air. It's the ocean water temperatures.
Is there any other causing it to break down like that, Joe? What's the reason?
Well, the theory is that we have the melting of the glacier. The melting of the glaciers in Greenland has decreased the salinity of the water off the coast there south of Greenland. So as a result, it raises the freezing temperature. Actually, causes water to freeze at a higher temperature. Instead of salt water doesn't usually freeze until it's down in the low 20s. Regular water freezes at 32, but if you decrease the salinity of the water, you're going to have ice forming in places that, south of Greenland that normally don't get that. But it also slows, the decreased salinity actually slows the motion of water. It makes it less buoyant, and as a result, you wind up with the Gulf Stream. One of the consequences is that the Gulf Stream seems to be breaking down out in the North Atlantic. All good? Okay. Yes.
Sir, on the other side of the coast,
That's
west
on the other side. I don't have a map for the other side, but yeah, it's on the other side. It's just past, where I had it.
East Coast.
Yes. Okay, so I'm sorry, I apologize. I am really like a little bit slow on the uptake today because my ears are all clogged up and my head is all clogged up. So I'm just having a bit of a difficult time. So I appreciate your patience. I wanted to show you some of the weather models that we use. Because one of the biggest issues, I think, and one of the more going forward, is the way information is disseminated with respect to social media. It's a problem because you don't have you don't necessarily have confidence in the sources that you're using, and this becomes problematic if you're trying to get information in order to make decisions that are going to impact your life. And in some cases, it might be a life and death decision that you might have to make during if we wind up with another tropical system coming northward. So please be sure that you use, there's so much out there, and a lot of it is bullshit. So, so bear that in mind. You're gonna be flooded with all sorts of, all kinds of information. So you want to make sure that whatever you use with getting your information, that you use somebody that you know and you can rely on. I mean, I've been here in this neighborhood for 30 years, so and I've worked in the market, so you guys know me. At least I hope you do. But the go-to spot is really good. nhc.noaa.gov and go to weather.gov. Those are your two places to go.
Can I just go to channel 1?
You could go to FiOS 1 News. I mean, yes, you can do that. I'm sorry, I just gotta get some water. Just bear with me, please. No, it's fine. Just give me 1 second. Yeah.
And I've been choking with the pollen. The dust in the air is unbelievable. I don't have allergies,
Me
but
neither.
just I ride a bike, and man, the other day I was just walking and just like scratch, stuff. My car is green. My car is gray. When I come out in the morning, it's green. The pine
Oh
tree.
yeah,
Unbelievable.
yeah, sure.
And when the wind blows the pine trees, like a cloud, all the dust. Unbelievable.
Yeah, there's another group.
Yeah, that's the 90-pound water.
No, that's fine. I drank it from the fountain. I've always got this image that those bottles of water are being filled by somebody and it's over a sink in Brooklyn. So I just drink off the fountain. What I have up here right now, if for those of you who are weather, I say weather geeky, you can go to tropicaltidbits.com. And you can actually look at weather models and weather maps if that's what your thing is. But it is available and it's absolutely free. And when your weather people are on TV talking about the European model and the GFS model and all these other models, this is where you can actually go and see for yourself what they look like. Now, if you look here, I'm going to roll this back. This is every 6 hours starting today. And remember earlier I showed you that the National Hurricane Center had an area in the Pacific that it was watching for the possibility of tropical cyclone development in the next 5 days. Well, if you look south of the coast of Mexico now, I'm going to just roll this along. We're now into next Tuesday, but right in here, you can see it right in there, you're going to get a little low that's going to wrap up. So that's where the model is actually developing a tropical storm here south of the coast of Mexico for later next week. Excuse me. Also, through all of this, and this is where you see development this time of year. If you're going to see something on the Atlantic Basin, you're in June, and in May, it came a little bit early with subtropical storm Alberto last week, but you're usually going to see it in the Northwest Caribbean or in the Gulf of Mexico. And you've got a lot of disturbed weather here all next week in that region. So it's always possible that something may try and come out of there. And if you notice, there's this little blob here. This is the model's 210 hours from now. So this is the reliability factor here is very low when you go out past the 5th day, and certainly when you go out past the 7th or 8th day. But it has been doing this for like the last 5 days, and it seems to be coming closer and closer. So it might be seeing something here, but it does actually develop some kind of tropical storm. This is around June 11th, so 10 days from now, in the Northwest Caribbean. You can see it there, and then it takes it northward into the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, and looks like, at least on this particular run, when it takes it to Tampa. But I want to just point out, models change very much in terms of the variation that you're going to see, and it's there 1 minute, it's there one early in the day, and then when another model run comes out later on, it might not be there, or it's going to be in a different place. When you go out further and further in time, there's going to be more variability. So I just want to show you real quick. If you go back 6 hours, hang on 1 second. So this is from earlier. Instead of having it near Tampa, it has it actually, just southeast of Mobile. And then if I go back to yesterday afternoon, it had it in the central Gulf of Mexico. And then if you go back, I'll go back to early Friday morning, and it had it. This is all for the same time. Okay, I'm just looking backwards at models for the same time, just to, just to illustrate to you, show you how everything changes. So you have to be really careful. You can't look at something 200 hours out in the future and say it's certitude. Okay, but weather models have actually gotten better at picking out tropical systems and developing them, which is actually quite encouraging. Once upon a time, you were really kind of left on your own to just watch stuff, and sometimes tropical systems would appear out of nowhere. But weather models have actually gotten better in picking out tropical systems. So this one, I'm going to change the. Again, this is just for laughs, because when I tell my YouTube audience a lot, when I do my daily broadcasts with them, because they're, a lot of them are very much, into weather. So they'll look at weather models from run to run. Why does it keep doing that? I tell them, until it gets inside, until you start to see things inside 7 days, and until you start to see other models do the same thing, I wouldn't really worry too much about there's not a whole lot of reliability. And on this run, by the way, it actually took this into South Carolina and off the Carolina coast, and then it goes out into the Atlantic around mid-month. But who knows? This is part of the puzzle that weather people have to deal with on a daily basis. And we look at all sorts of different models, and I just want to show you. I'll show you when I switch off to the Canadian model, for example. It actually doesn't have anything in the same spot. I'll get a little closer so you can see it better. And oh boy, there should be laws against getting colds in June. It's like, in the wintertime it's one thing, but God, in the summertime it's just awful. It is. Okay, so here's the Canadian model. Let me just show you the difference between the American GFS model for the same time. It has a tropical storm, in the Northwest Caribbean, and the Canadian weather model has nothing. So that tells me that the reliability factor here is low. And if I pull up the German model, which is the Icon model, there's a new one. The new one's coming out now. If we go back one, the German model didn't have anything, and the European model last night didn't have anything either. So only our GFS has something. So until all three models, excuse me, my rule is until all the models are showing it, I don't pay too much attention, and that saves me a lot of aggravation. I'm sorry, folks. I really apologize for this cold. Does anybody have any questions at this point? And they can be anything, folks. You can ask me anything you'd like. Yes, sir. Let me go. Hold on. Let me go you first.
Which model is reliable, most reliable?
Which what?
Which model is reliable?
I'm having a tough time on this. Which model? Well, they all work until they stop working. That's kind of how I look at it. Yeah, so I kind of try to find the one that's working for me at the top for the time, and then stick with that until it stopped working. Over the winter, the North American model, which is a short-term model, or we call it the NAM model, was exceptional, especially with the March nor'easters, and it worked so well through the whole winter that it really surprised even me, and I'm a big supporter of that model because I know how it works. I know its intricacies, and I can you know, it's a when you know your tools, it's like, you know, a good handyman knows his tools, and that's how kind of with the NAM model I know how it works. But it stopped working during the month of May. It has not done very well with thunderstorms. So, but a lot of times, you know, each model has runs where it does very well, and then and then one day you'll wake up and it'll stop working. Yes?
The salinity of the water, does that have any bearing on?
I'm sorry. The salinity of the water.
Yes, does that have any bearing on the weather or influence?
Yes, it will, because if the salinity of the water, the decreased salinity, causes ocean water temperatures south of Greenland to be colder than they otherwise would be, and if it causes the Gulf Stream to shut down, it will have implications on weather in Western Europe. It's going to mean for colder winters there. This winter might have been the shot across the bow for them, maybe the last two winters actually, but this winter in particular. And for us, it could be, excuse me, the Gulf Stream plays a very important role in the spring in transporting heat into the northern latitudes. If the Gulf Stream is breaking down, it will mean that the transfer of heat to the northern latitudes from the tropics will be interrupted, and it will be slowed. So that would mean for us where our winters would possibly last longer, like they have been the last few years. We've had, you know, cold weather and snow going in through March and the first part of April. We may be seeing more of that. It also may mean that the winters may start a little later, and we've seen that over the past few years, but it's been more along the lines of like flipping switches, where we seem to go from summer, you know, really warm weather that extends deeper into the fall than it used to, and then, you know, winter, all of a sudden, you know, a switch is flipped, and this past December was exactly like that. It was as if somebody just flipped a switch and we suddenly were freezing to death.
You were spot on when you said, I watched you on TV, you said that
there was a chance that the temperature wasn't going to go above freezing for about 2 weeks. I think I was right around Christmas time, and we went through a real hard.
I'm hiring you. I'm going to hire you as an agent. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, you know, it was a very remarkable winter that we had last winter. In a lot of ways, I've never seen the atmosphere stretch to extremes like I saw last winter. In so many different respects, it was stretched to an extreme in November, which led to the 6-week cold outbreak in December into January. Then it was stretched into extremes in the other direction that led to the very warm late January and February. And then during February, we had this massive event in the upper atmosphere, this stratospheric, this warming in the stratosphere, which set the ball rolling for the 4 nor'easters. Let me show you a very interesting satellite loop. Hang on a second.
I think March turned out to be colder in February, right, Joe? That was the first time I think they said that ever happened.
Yeah, I believe that is correct. Hold on. I'm sorry. Just bear with me. Let me see. We have the 4 Easter satellite loop.
So how do you contact Mother Nature to find out exactly what's going to go on?
I'm sorry, how do I contact what?
Mother Nature, because you can't fool Mother Nature, right?
Well, I actually am seeing the visual of the old commercial for it was the margarine commercial. Carol Burnett did a variation of that. I always thought it was hilarious, but they were parodying, making fun of that commercial. It's not nice to fool Mother Nature, right? And then the voice asked, Mother Nature, have you ever been fooled before? And she says, only once. And then Carol Burnett turns to the side of the camera. She's got a baby bump. I'm going to try to find by the way, interesting point about the 4 Easters. Why is it being so difficult? All right, I have to, you know what? I love Google, but you got to always be careful how you 4 Easter satellite loop. Maybe that's what will bring it up. You always have to be careful, not lop, loop. You always. Hello.
Sir?
Yes.
Salinity of the oceans remains constant. It is increasing over time.
The salinity changes over time. As glaciers melt and refreeze, you're going to see the salinities. You're going to see salinity change, and that impacts temperatures, on a global scale for years. Unfortunately, I can't seem to find it. I cannot believe I'm having this problem here.
Does the salinity impact
No. You're going to have evaporation no matter whether, I don't know whether salinity causes, and its impact on evaporation, but I think it would be minimal. There's probably no real difference. So you're going to have, humid air regardless of whether the water's salted or unsalted or fresh. Okay, it's being evil. There is a 4 Easter satellite loop here. I am going to find it. Okay. Hang on. All right, let's try YouTube. It always came up when I had it before. FOUR 4 Easter satellite loop. There's a satellite loop here that's got all 4 storms, one after another, unless the person took it down. He must have taken them down. Well, you know what? We've got nor'easter number 4, which we can take a look at. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Oh my God. Let me just say, by the way, there is no linkage between the fact that we had the stormy weather that we had in late February till early April and the upcoming hurricane season, okay? There's no connection with that. It just happened that we got into a pattern that produced 4 nor'easters, and then we transitioned over. This was the one, by the way, this was the one March 22nd, and we got clobbered with snow out of this one. But it took a little while for it to get going. It's amazing watching the radar loop, and you start to see the snow just kind of blossom out. We had to wait here until that night. So during the day, it was an exercise in frustration. If you look right there, see how the little that dark purple shows up? That is when we got clobbered during the nighttime hours. It was amazing. The first bands went up, and then you get that next band that comes in on the South Shore. Right in there. See it? They highlighted it there. Those are the ones that hammered us.
Mr. Cioffi, I got
Yes.
a question. Living on the island, we have the South Shore and North Shore. What determines if the South Shore is going to get 4 inches of snow and the North Shore is going to get 4 inches of snow? And really, I don't know.
Okay, the answer to that question is wind direction is very important. What are the actual surface temperatures that are going on? In one of those March events that we had, there was I don't know if it was the March one, was one at the end of February, where if you were south of the LIE, particularly like MacArthur Airport. Now I'm 2 miles north of the LIE because I live right here. I could walk home. We had about 3 inches of snow. MacArthur had a coating. Okay, if you drove down a little bit further south, the ground was wet. So the LIE actually marks a very important line on Long Island. So wind direction is going to be, very important. Any kind of ocean component wind can be problematic, but particularly an east or southeast wind is going to make more for a rain event than anything else, as opposed to a northeast wind, which is usually going to mean more of a snow event. And of course, you have to look at what the temperature profile is, not just at the ground level, but also in the upper atmosphere. The March snows that we had came when temperatures barely around the freezing mark. So this is the argument that I get into, because in March you start to get into sun angle issues and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, if it snows hard, it trumps all that stuff. So intensity of snowfall is going to trump sun angle. It's going to trump borderline temperatures. If it's snowing hard enough, it could be 34. You're going to still put 2 feet of snow on the ground.
When I worked for the Smithtown Highway Department, I remember times they're going to call trucks in because it wasn't snowing in Smithtown. But yet before it's so long, you would get dumped on.
Yeah, it just happened. There's a lot of there is a lot of variability, and it also depends on, sometimes we get Long Island sound effect snow showers, which is kind of like the lake effect snows that go on in upstate New York. So, that does also have impact. And wind direction, air mass. Where's the air mass from? If it's an Arctic air mass, if it's an air mass of true Arctic origin, we get a lot of snow shower activity with Long Island sound effect because the air is very, very cold, and the sound can be relatively warm, so it picks up and creates snow showers. So we saw a lot. We saw that happen actually a few times this past winter.
So years ago, we used to hear whenever there was a really bad winter storm, they used to call it a hurricane in here.
Yeah, that was a.
I forgot.
Yeah. What is the? Okay, you know what? I can answer that question this way. All right.
It would actually show an eye, like the storm of February '78 on the satellite. You could actually see an eye like a hurricane.
Right, or like the bomb cyclone. All right. They would have to, in order to determine whether they're actually, the whole concept of a neuter cane, okay? The reason why is that they look at this. This is what was called back in the first snowstorm we had last winter, the first big snowstorm, which was the one in January, the bomb cyclone, okay? There's nothing new there, okay? That was somebody, that was a social media person putting a hashtag about something that we used to say when we were in college, when we were, in our early 20s, and we would get really excited about storm development. We would use a phrase amongst us young meteorologists. We would say that the storm was going to bomb out, it was going to intensify. That's all that means. So there's nothing new here. This concept of a neuter cane, they would have to. There have been a couple of instances with certain storms where, like I believe in the '78 storm, if I remember correctly, they actually flew planes into it, to see if there was any kind of, the core of the storm. If it's a tropical storm, it has a warm core. If it's a non-tropical storm, it has a cold core. I'm so sorry. Well, sometimes there's something in the middle. They're not unusual. It happens. Some of these big storms, they don't have, they might develop a little bit of a warmer core, especially if they happen later in the season, or if they're happening early in the season in the wintertime. I don't think it actually makes them stand out any differently than some of the other stronger storms that we've had. I'm sorry. It is no fun not being able to breathe. But if you look at this as the one from January, that kind of classic look to it here with the circulation of the storm sitting off the Carolina coast and off the Virginia coast. This was the first one. We got a foot to a foot and a half of snow out of this, and then we had ones in March, which of course were so much fun.
It seems to me, this might sound odd, but growing up in the 60s, I don't know, maybe because I was a little kid, it seems like the snows were heavier and lasted longer.
Okay.
Today.
So, if you've been to my talks before, like Leon, you have, so you know what's coming. All right, so how many think that it snowed more when they were younger? Raise your hands.
I just think we got up because I wasn't that tall. But I remember in the early 60s when we had snowstorms, I can remember it stay around for months, it seemed like.
Well, that's a different issue though, because the 60s were the 60s were an unusually snowy and cold 10-year period. So yeah, the snows used to hang around longer. But on the other hand, in terms of total snowfall, it actually has snowed more in the last 18 winters, starting with the winter of 2000. The average snowfall on Long Island is double what it was in the prior 30, from 1970 to 2000. It is also 50% we're averaging about 43, 44 inches a year over the last 18 years. Versus, by the way, I had 75 inches that I measured here in my neighborhood, right here, this winter. The average snowfall is running close to 40% higher than normal for the last 18 years. Why this is, I don't know. And this is all coming where temperatures really have actually been kind of in an uptrend. The uptrend is flattened out in the last 18 years, but it was in an uptrend from 1980 to 2000, and then has kind of gone sideways since then. But for whatever reason, we're in this upcycle when it comes to total snowfall. But yeah, the 60s were In fact, I think there were white Christmases almost every year and every winter in the 60s, and then they stopped.
Just telling me something like it started like in November. It just
Yeah.
It was just.
We're getting more late season events in this stretch we're in now than early season. But I got to tell you, that could flip at any time. I'm going to be interested to see, this whole Gulf Stream collapsing thing in the Atlantic with the upcoming. First of all, I'm going to be curious to see how it impacts the hurricane season. Because whether it's going to continue to cause that colder water to filter down to the south in the eastern Atlantic, but how it's going to impact the winter going forward is going to be interesting. I'm going to see if any of my I get my YouTube audience there. Am I predicting any hurricane? Yeah. I would say I would say that I'm not predicting anything specific. Obviously, you can't really do that. But I think we're going to see probably a slightly above average season in terms of total storms. I think they're going to probably develop closer to us, as opposed to forming way out in the Atlantic and marching across like they did last year. I think you're going to see the systems maybe form a little bit further to the west. I want to look at that ocean water temperature profile that I showed you before. This one.
Starting around when?
Well, we had this early season one a couple of weeks ago. Last week. And by the way, Alberto maintained tropical characteristics all the way up when it reached up into Michigan, which was bizarre. But it was.
Their first cyclone ever up there.
Yeah, it was amazing. And when you look at the May cyclones where they've been, it's like they're all concentrated off the Atlantic coast and a couple of them in the Gulf of Mexico. And then you've got this one that's like kind of stands all the way out by itself. I tend to think that you're probably going to see systems form a little bit closer. Maybe all this cold water will mean that the systems out in the Atlantic will take a longer time to get going, assuming that this water temperature profile doesn't change. We have, if you look out in the Pacific, where I have the mouse there, the equatorial Pacific. This is where we would look for El Nino, La Nina. So if the waters were way above average or way below average, it doesn't look like we have any real trend in either direction. So, I'm kind of thinking that this will be like an average year. We didn't have any East Coast threats last year, okay, really. So we haven't really had any major threats since Sandy. Maybe it's time. Maybe maybe one of these will come close. Kind of.
I just think the tri-state, Connecticut, Jersey, and us, very lucky over the years. We have our hits with Sandy and whatnot.
By the way,
Florida gets slammed.
Yeah. By the way, one of the things that's happened over the last few years, I was speaking with my friends over at the Weather Service, and we were talking about the fact that in terms of coastal flooding, Long Island's profile of coastal flooding has actually changed since Sandy. What seems to be happening is that the coastal flooding has increased on the South Shore, in Western Suffolk, and in Nassau, in the bays. Coastal flooding has also increased, oddly enough, in eastern Long Island, from Riverhead east. They've been getting many more not only have they been getting coastal flooding coming in with the tide, but I think the last one of the March events, they had the water actually coming up from under the ground. hydrostatic flooding, I think it's called, where it comes up from the ground at high tide. So it has that has changed. Coastal flooding in Long Island Sound has remained about the same. Okay, the coastal flooding issues around New York City have actually gotten better because of seawall improvements that they've made. They are going to see the tidal, the point where it used to be. I believe you used to get tidal flooding in New York City was about 6 feet above mean low water. Now it's at 7. So the area surrounding New York, the Jersey County surrounding New York Harbor in and of itself, there may be a higher threshold to achieve the kind of flooding that occurred in Irene and occurred in Sandy. And then you have the Jersey Shore, where the Jersey Shore is problematic because they've actually also seen an increase in the amount of coastal flooding events, and they've been getting them in instances where, you know, they used to not get them. You know, kind of, I wouldn't say minor events, but events that might be something a little bit greater than minor now cause problems for them on the Jersey Shore from Sandy Hook down to Cape May, and particularly in South Jersey. So it'll be interesting, you know, if we ever do get another threat, that's another consideration. And the local National Weather Service office is going to be doing gearing a lot of their tools toward the coastal flooding issue. I mean, we don't have a coastal flooding issue here, physically where we are, but for our friends on the South Shore, or perhaps if you've come up from the South Shore, you know that where you are, Leon, in Lindenhurst. The Lindenhurst tidal flooding has changed quite a bit in the last 5 years. You're getting more and more of it than you used to.
Oh yeah, very noticeable.
And you're getting it at times when, in the past you wouldn't necessarily get it.
Absolutely.
Joe, I noticed at the time, I remember watching TV with Irma.
Yes.
If you notice in one of the loops there, when it hit the coast of Cuba, before that it was like a 160 mile, it was the Cat 5.
Yeah.
If you notice on the thing, you see how much it weakens? In other words, if Cuba wasn't there, I think in Florida would have been.
Well, it bounced off the, it bounced off that archipelago. Mm-hmm. I can't even pronounce words.
You see it weakened.
Yeah, it did weaken. It did.
Went to a 2 from it was 160. It dropped. And then
well, a lot of the the terrain of Cuba, especially the eastern half, is very mountainous, so that did disrupt the circulation. You also can see, Jose there just gets very close to that would have been, really horrible if they had gotten hit with a second category 5 in 5 days. I couldn't imagine what that would have been like.
I got my cousin at Cape Coral. He was scared to death.
Mm. Well,
right outside of Fort Myers, he said it was unbelievable. I think they had 130 mile an hour gusts or something. He said it was just,
right at the point here where it makes landfall.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really remarkable stretch of weather, I have to tell you, from last year. I really hope not to see it again for a while. I worked my tail off for 6 weeks, and I don't want to do that again. I'm getting too old for this stuff. So here it is on the close-up view, and you can. This is when the eye crosses the Keys. And, in the Florida Straits, water temperatures are up close to 90, so there was a concern that this would have strengthened a bit more. It actually did strengthen a little bit, but it never really got back to the way it was. Try and also, by the way, in terms of how you consume the information that you get with regards to tropical storms and hurricanes, please, I know there's always a tendency, because we all do it. You got to pay attention. You got to pay attention. Weather is one of those things where if I say it's going to rain, if it's going to rain later this afternoon and it's not going to rain all day, you'll have some people that will take that statement to mean it isn't going to rain at all. And then you're going to have some people take that statement where they will hear rain, hear nothing all day. Okay? So I would just say, make sure, you take the time to put your ears to it with what's being said if you're listening. And the best thing to do is read it. So if you go to the Weather Service's websites and read the information that is presented to you, so that you can make the right decisions with regards to where you want to go, with dealing with tropical storms. Those of you who remember Sandy, the big issue here was wind. We had a lot of tree damage. I split 11 cords of firewood. So I actually still have the last cord that I am in my backyard now, waiting for the next winter to burn it. So kept my oil bill down.
Sir, I have read somewhere in the book, there are about 121 days in a year in New York. So many days, rain days.
Right.
121.
121?
121. Yes.
Where, here?
Yes.
Okay.
And it means that there is possibility of rain 33% every day.
Well, that's correct. Yeah, I mean, you're going to, exactly, that's correct. If it rains on 121 days, there's a statistical 1 in 3 chance that you're going to have rain on any given day, if you look at it that way. And so there is really no skill to come out and say, you have a chance of rain. All right. There's no skill there. Okay. Where there's skill involved is if I tell you that the rain is going to start at 11 o'clock and at 3 o'clock, be heaviest between time A, somewhere in between.
Mr. Cioffi, speaking of,
Yes.
How do you determine how much rain? How do you know when you tell us, we're going to get 5 inches of rain today?
Well, we do use models for that. I'm just going to bring myself up full screen so that my YouTube buddies can see me. In terms of the forecast?
Yes.
Okay, so let's take a look. I'll bring up all models. By the way, do this. I'm going to bring up today's weather. How's that? Because it is front and center.
Is the green rain?
Yes. We actually have the brand new GFS run coming out now, but I'm going to go to the one before that. So this is for this afternoon. Now, it's not showing what the radar is going to look like on this model. It's just basically showing where there's going to be measurable rainfall. So the darker, it doesn't, this is every one of these flips here is 6 hours. It doesn't tell you when in that 6 hour period the rain is going to happen. We'd have to use other models for that. So tomorrow, the big change in the weather for tomorrow is the fact that there's this big high in southeastern Canada that's building southward. So it's pushing the cloud line further and further south. So we're not only going to have a nice day, but we're going to have an east wind coming in off the water. So it's going to be pretty cool. Excuse me, it'll probably only be in the 60s. And then this is the rain for Sunday night into Monday. Night. And that yellow, by the way, would be heavy rain. Now, each model comes up with its own idea of how much precip is going to fall. So if we look at, for example, this is the GFS forecast for rainfall between now and Monday evening. I'll move it to Tuesday morning. So this is through Tuesday morning. The scale on the side, the white, you start to get into the wider areas here, that's 2 inches of rain or more. Okay, now bear in mind that's spread out over the next 78 hours. All right, so you would have to look and see where the bulk of that rain falls. We can look at this in 24-hour increments. So it looks like that there's going to be something today in terms, because between now and tomorrow morning, it looks like 1/4 to 1/2 inch of rainfall. So it looks like somebody's going to get into some downpours later today. Whether we do or not remains to be seen. And then tomorrow night into Monday, there's your 2 inches for Monday. So we use all this stuff all the time. Here's the radar. This is the NAM model. So we're going to look. Actually, you know what? Let's look at the HRRR model. And see what's going to happen. This model only goes out 18 hours. So this is like an ultra short range model. There we go. We'll get really close up. My YouTube audience likes to watch me. All right, there isn't too much happening at the moment. So this is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You can see that those radar echoes start to pop up off Long Island Sound and over the East End, but more of it is really down in New Jersey. So it looks like it doesn't really produce very much here. It looks like a few downpours. This is at 10 o'clock tonight, 11 o'clock tonight, I'm sorry. So it looks like there's some showers in there, and then they kind of move westward. This is a little odd because they're moving east to west instead of the normal west to east. They're actually moving southward from New England. You see them there, and they come down. That's that push of that front and high that's coming down from the north. And then you've got this low that develops in Virginia. This is going to be the rain for probably later Sunday night into Monday, but I'm thinking the daytime tomorrow here should be okay. Sure as hope so, because that's what I forecasted. And I'm sorry, just taking it takes a little time for this to load. Let's see, where are we? Okay, that's tomorrow. Excuse me. So even the NAM model doesn't have. The NAM model actually has a pretty good downpour around 8 or 9 o'clock. Right in there. We'll see later if it turns out to be right, because it does look like, you see where it has that yellow and red in Long Island Sound. So it looks like it has a pretty strong thunderstorm, maybe just north of Sunken Meadow. And then it moves westward, which is really bizarre. And then you've got this big high that builds southward, and then here's the rain for Sunday night, Monday, that comes through. And this model's rainfall, by the way, is going to be less than the GFS, I bet. Hello. Come on. Come on. There you go. So this model is actually, well, it's got a little pocket of like 2+ inches. I bet you most of that is from that thunderstorm that it shows from late this afternoon, touching parts of the North Shore and going into the Bronx and Southwest Connecticut. Very interesting that would be the case. Yes, sir.
Next to radar, infrared. Could you show infrared radar?
If you go to, we do have infrared on the satellite pictures, which would be this. You know, that's one of the infrared shots that we look at. That's actually color enhanced. But let me pull up. This is a I'm going to just bring up. This is I have the Miami radar, the Florida radar. I believe this is the one from Tampa St. Pete during Alberto. Let me just bring it to the top, and let me go to. I'll bring up our local radar. I don't know if it's going to show anything yet. Our local radar is down. Okay, let's go to. I'm going to change that. Let's go to the one in Fort Dix. So there's your there are your radar echoes here down in southern New Jersey. There really isn't too much happening now, but we're starting to see a couple of pop-ups. Looks like one up in northern Connecticut along near Route 8, not too far from where I went fishing, and another one up in Sullivan County, west of Middletown and south of Monticello. So we're probably going to see stuff start to bubble up here. You can access this radar, by the way, if you go to weather.gov and click on the near the geography of where we are, and there's a box there. It'll say radar, and you can pull that up. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
The flood that
Yes, sir.
The flood they had in Maryland the other day. Was that involved? Was Alberto involved in that, or that was just?
No, that is actually a very good example of what happens where you build where you're not supposed to. Because, excuse me, that is the third. I believe that is the third time.
Second time since 16.
16, and the third since 11.
Yeah, that was.
But I think it's the third since 11. There's a serious infrastructure problem there in terms of how they built things. And that is, excuse me, that is a very, critical concern and a critical element, because you have to address the fact that the reason why some of these places are getting 100-year floods is because infrastructure has changed the topography the way it was to begin with to handle the heavy rains that would occur. The reason why you have houses that burn down in California where there are wildfires is because those houses should not have been built there in the first place. And and here on the coast, we've got houses that are built on the shoreline, and in hurricanes and nor'easters, but particularly in hurricanes, you're going to lose that, and inevitably they wind up getting rebuilt, and then they lose them in the next one. But there has to be a recognition of the fact that these 100-year floods that are occurring are not only, maybe they're occurring more often because of weather variations. They're also occurring because the infrastructure that of the areas that they're impacting has changed so much that 100 years ago it didn't flood because, you know what, there was a natural drainage in a certain area where to take the water from A to B. Now they stuck a highway in between, or they put up a building, or they developed a shopping mall. I'm not criticizing any of those things. We are human. We gotta live. We have to live someplace. But there's a lot of mixed messages in terms of when people talk about climate change and global warming on the one hand, but we also have to address the fact that a lot of the stuff that happens is because of the fact that, well, maybe we wouldn't have 100-year floods if we didn't build in those particular areas. It is a real consideration.
Isn't there a river that runs to Ellicott City? Well,
there's two rivers apparently, and I think the way it was years and years ago, the river, I don't remember the names of the rivers, but that the water from the smaller one tends to drain into the bigger one. But the city, the way the city is laid out, there's no real pathway for the water to get to point A to point B, and you wind up with a problem. No TV questions today. It's my real color hair. Every 2 weeks, my colorist dyes the gray in just perfectly.
When you think about it, how many times Doom Road has been wiped out? Was that West Hampton? Yeah. People insist on rebuilding it, and that's why we pay more for our houses to subsidize them. It's a perfect example right there.
Well, those are legitimate. Those are legitimate political questions. I have a place. When I lived in New Orleans many years ago, I bought a house, and I never sold it. So I get federally subsidized flood insurance, because I live in a flood zone. I mean, the house is in a flood zone. So I actually have to buy that insurance, but it's not cheap. But yeah, there is, you know, subsidies and you know, monies that, like you said, you know, your money goes to help you, your money goes to help me, my money goes to help you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are legitimate political questions, and they seem to be coming front and center now because of the fact that, you know, at least where we are, we pay huge amounts of taxes. And I mean, I don't mean to get political, but I'm just saying, I don't think anybody would argue with me that we don't pay huge amounts of taxes here where we are. And it's become problematic. So, you know, how is that going to be spent with regards to the coastal infrastructure and, you know, the impact of, you know, how much money do we spend on you know, the tides, seawalls, all that, the changing tidal profile of the South Shore. The breach, by the way, apparently the breach of that was created with Sandy is actually beginning to close on the South Shore. And so my understanding is that they expect that breach to actually close and go back to the way it was. So that it'll be interesting to see whether, you know, once that breach closes, whether that changes the Great South Bay tidal flooding profile.
I got another question for you. Years ago, the Daily News used to put out a weather almanac every year.
Yes.
And
people don't read newspapers anymore, but go on.
Yeah, I have quite a number of them, old almanacs from the Daily News, and basically, I keep hearing that the world's highest temperature ever recorded is supposed to be in Death Valley at 134 degrees.
Yeah.
Well, according to this weather almanac that I have, they list 136 degrees worldwide in someplace Azizia, Libya, in July, I think, of 1922. I watched the Weather Channel, and they have the 10 biggest things or whatever, and the coldest places, and then the warmest, the wettest. They keep saying 134. They're saying Death Valley holds the world temperature, and I have it all. Several of these almanacs that list 136. So I was just wondering.
Well, you know, let's see what Google has to say. Maybe Google says something different.
Someplace in Azizia, Libya.
What?
I used to collect those almanacs. Daily News.
Huh?
I used to collect those almanacs. Daily News.
What is the world's
The Daily News, yeah.
highest?
Back in the 60s, I used to get it every year. It's like 15 cents. I have a whole bunch of them. And they have all the weather facts in New York City, basically. And they list the United States highest temperature.
Okay. On 13th December 2012, the WMO disqualified the record of the highest temperature recorded exactly 90 years after it had been established at El Azizia, Libya, with a measurement of 58 Celsius. The official highest recorded temperature is now 134, measured on 10 July 1913 in Death Valley.
That answers my question. I was always wondering, again, like I said, I saw that, and that explains.
So thank you very much for putting up with me. Let me just say goodbye to my YouTube folks. We'll say goodbye. We'll hopefully maybe see you guys later. I don't know if I'm going to be up to doing a live stream with this cold I have, folks, but thanks for being here, and maybe we'll see you later on this afternoon and this evening. So just thanks again for joining me. Let me stop that.